I'm Adam Walls.
Hello, my name is Barbara Kleeb, and I'm here with Adam Walls I'm in Zurich, and Adam is in
Plymouth, England.
Yeah. We have been discussing how system thinking could have helped this pandemic, especially viable systems model. I think it's system 4 that would really have been helpful. Can you tell a little bit about it, Adam?
Sure. The viable systems model is an attempt to take how we work as organisms on this planet and the management systems within us and apply them to business or organizational context. System 4 is the ability to see stuff coming, the future environment. So you see the bus coming, for example, you can get out of the way. And we were talking about how the PPE, the personal protective equipment situation, was a problem in Switzerland like it was in the UK, or continues to be in the UK. And when it first came up, I said to Barbara, or I said to you, why is this a problem? Because you could see that China had this problem, and really somebody from your hospital would know about viruses and say, oh, this is going to be a worldwide thing, this is going to be a pandemic, so what are we going to need? And phone somebody who has this problem and say, what do we need? And they say respirators and PPE. And you go, okay, fine, we'll buy some respirators and PPE. And if every hospital in Switzerland did this, then there wouldn't have been a shortage, because you would have been ahead of it. You would have seen it coming and you'd have prepared yourself. And I think you said that system doesn't exist in Switzerland. Is that right?
I mean, of course it exists in several places. I think if just one hospital would have had this system 4 looking out and seeing what's coming, then in this pandemic, because the other ones didn't have, and I think this is a nice thing that we were looking for everybody and collaborating. So if one hospital had kind of piles of FFP2 masks, then they would have had to give it to the other hospitals so that everybody has enough. But also we have this law for pandemic, and this law is saying that every Swiss citizen should have 50 masks at home, which we were not even communicated, and we were not delivered those 50 masks. But we would have had no problem if this paragraph would have been really communicated in an effective way to the Swiss citizens. But not even that has happened.
So within the viable system is all about communication. So that all these systems, so you have system 5, which is who am I, what do I believe? System 4, which is seeing stuff coming. System 3, which is your your internal management systems. System 2, which is coordination. System 1, which is doing. All of those things need to link up. So and the communication needs to be instantaneous almost, because if you see the bus coming, you want to jump out of the way. You don't want to have a meeting of all the other systems to decide whether or not you need to jump out of the way. You'd be hit by the bus. So really, the ability for all of these things to communicate with each other is critical. So management need to be able to communicate with the operation, and the operation need to be able to communicate with management, and the board or the who we are need to be able to communicate with management and the operation, and vice versa. They need to be able to communicate back. So I always use this analogy of saying, well, if your board are gods on a cloud, if they're celebrities that sit somewhere else in a different country or whatever, then there's no way that communication is two-way. But it's only that those gods on a cloud talk to themselves and communicate out to you. And I think you were talking about having an example of that being the case.
I think something else, because we have this pandemic, and we induced the lockdown as a very emergent thing that we have to do to not have more people dying. But I think it should have been as emergent to say, if we had a functioning system 4, to see, oh, this pandemic is coming, so now we have a totally unknown and new disease, so that it's a real emergency to start gather that data in an intelligent way, so that you would then either define maybe 5 areas in Switzerland that you test nearly everybody, or you would then randomly select some people and test them, so that you have the reliable data that you could kind of really say the case fatality rate is like this, and it's developing like this, and also we have to take these and these measures because we know, and not to kind of and then it's
Does it feel like that's happened to you? Does it feel like there's been good collection of data? Because obviously the viable system model is about communication between those 5 levels that they have. It's not a hierarchy, but there are 5 areas of concern, essentially.
Yes.
And the fluidity of communication and obviously the feedback coming from the environment informs how those things react and how they deal with it. So if you're not getting out of the way of the bus fast enough, then your eyes will tell you that, and it'll feed it back in and you'll move faster, right? And the same with this. It seems that it's like, oh, in this situation, this is what we do. We have a pandemic, then we click into this mode. And actually that mode seems to have not been suitable because it's missing things like, well, probably we should be testing everybody, right? See who's got it, see how many people have actually got it. And that should be, I think in South Korea, that was one of the first things they did, right? And that's why they were so successful. I think in New Zealand, the same thing.
But
they
in
just went out
Korea,
and
they were looking out. They were knowing, and they were concerned because of a pandemic that was there before, and that's why they tested and they made all those strategies. But this is kind of like the looking out system 4.
Is this so? We didn't learn from them, and that's the other thing. This nationalist view of the world, right? That we have this. We looked at, so we didn't look at South Korea and say, oh, right, they know what they're doing, let's follow them. It's, I know we have a process for pandemic that we've probably had many meetings with consultancies and we've decided this is what we do.
I don't know. They were at least they were as an infotainment in the Swiss TV, and then everybody knew that they did it better than we did.
And we now see it, right? We now see New Zealand and South Korea, certainly in the UK, where we have what is the highest death rate in Europe, maybe the 2nd highest in the world. I think we're not. I think we're the 4th highest in the world per million population, but in absolute numbers, I think we're the 2nd highest in the world. And what we saw in this country is we saw a political view that we can't ask people to do this because the government's view of how we perceive the world is we're British and we're exceptional. Well, no, that's actually the government's view of the British. We're exceptional and therefore, it'll pass us by some magically. And this is a similar view to Donald Trump, I think, in America, which is, oh, it's nothing and it'll pass us by. And that more reflects the personal views of the leader and how he doesn't get ill and therefore only weak people get ill, than the reality of the situation, which is this is happening here and we can see it coming and therefore we need to act now. And I think that communication didn't work. It's almost like it's not that it didn't work. It wasn't that it wasn't there. It's that it was ignored. And I wonder if there's a similarity with business sometimes when the leaders of business hear noise coming from the business saying all this stuff's going wrong, and they stick their fingers in their ears and ignore it because it doesn't fit with their worldview.
Yeah.
This sort of narcissistic leader thing. And I wonder if also at the end of this we'll see that the narcissistic leaders have the highest death rate. It's certainly looking that way at the moment.
Which leader isn't narcissistic?
I would argue that the leader of New Zealand isn't narcissistic. She's truly empathetic. In fact, the ladies, the women leaders have done very well. Germany's done well, you know, South Korea's done well, New Zealand's done well, and a whole bunch of other countries run by women. Pretty much the ones who've done really well are run by women. And the ones like Brazil, America, UK, run by guys that you wouldn't want to pint with in the pub. We're paying in deaths, right? We're paying in numbers of dead. I don't know about Belgium, because Belgium had quite a hard problem as well, and France. You could probably argue that France have a narcissistic leader in Macron. But I don't know about Belgium. I don't know whether the Belgian leaders like that.
Anyway, now we are starting to stop the lockdown, and what I've also seen that people were acting. Most of the people were acting in a good way, because they were more relaxing and they were keeping the distance and everything. And now that we're opening up, it would still be a chance to have a system 4 in place. But
well, they want to go back to normality, right? And this idea that normal is good. Well, normal was good for the people that it was good for, and those people have been successful in the old way. And I would argue that the people who thrived in the old way are not the people you should be listening to about the new way. Maybe the people you should be listening to about the new way are more interested in society as a whole than their own personal gain. So would you ask Jeff Bezos what to do? Well, he'd say go back to the way it was, because he's the richest man in the world and becoming richer by the day. Do you really want to take his advice on how the world should run? Because if you take his advice, he wins the game of Monopoly. He gets all the money and we all lose.
But hopefully there are more forces from the field of entrepreneurs and everybody who was already set up to work remotely that will have a big impact. And I hope a good impact, because in my opinion, nature has to recover, and it did have a little recovery time.
I've seen organizations that do really well. Certainly the ones that were quite flat and did follow a viable systems model approach. They may not have been aware of it, but just the way that they structured themselves was a viable system. Mm-hmm. They found that there was no difference to them. People could work from home, they could work in the office. It made no difference. But the ones where people really were trying to control their people and create this closed system and this kind of factory vision, they were forced to face the fact that now all of these people are open systems sat in their own front room. And how do I control my people? And there's something very sad that employee surveillance software is one of the fastest growing market segments since the crisis struck. Oh. So businesses are learning from this. They're going, oh, I need to surveil my people. I need to control my people. Otherwise, it'll be chaos and it'll be disorder. Maybe it will be because of the way you run things. But there are certainly organizations who are not experiencing that at all.
Yeah, I think control is really an issue right now. And we have to engage to keep our freedom. And in my opinion, leadership should be happening by inspiration and collaboration instead of control.
Control is the biggest waste. People will move towards order. If you enforce that order on people, then they will resist it. If you let them coalesce around a vision, they will happily do that and they will happily deliver for you. In fact, productivity is often increased by removing control and letting people find an equilibrium at which they can deliver. And if you ask people what upsets them about work, most of the time is they're not allowed to work the way they want to work. That it's, I'm being forced to work a particular way because somebody believes that it's the most productive. And in fact, I would argue that I've seen more productivity increases from relinquishing that control than I have from making it more so, establishing more control.
Yeah, I think it is, instead of control, you can start from trust, but then you have to add something, which is awareness. And I do it with a lot of my intuition, and then asking the right questions, because I don't like to have control over me. I like to be in a field of trust, and I like to also lead in this way.
Most of us don't want to be controlled. Some do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are people who like being controlled, and there are people who want to be controlling.
Yes.
But the majority of people, I find, if they're allowed, they can thrive in their own control. They will find ways of working. If I ask people to improve what they do, often they know how.
Yeah.
But they're not allowed to do that because the business won't support it, or it doesn't fit with whatever view the manager has of how they should be doing the job. But most of the time, if I take the manager out and get rid of them altogether, productivity increases immediately.
I think this was a brilliant discussion, and we went from A to Z, so it's a bit long, but it was really fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Thank you, Barbara. It was fun talking.
Ciao, Adam. Mwah.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Ciao.